Come in. Come in. Sit down. My friends, fellow citizens, guests, welcome. It is with feelings of great diffidence that I meet with you today. I am quite aware that in times like the present, a man ought to utter nothing for which he would not willingly be responsible in time and eternity. I know that you have come today without regard to political party or principle, but simply because I, at the present moment, happen to represent the majesty of this great nation. I will say to you that whenever I appear before a body of citizens such as this, I feel very strongly tempted to speak to them regarding the nature of the struggle in which we are presently engaged. I have viewed it as an attempt on the one hand to overthrow our form of government, its institutions, while we, for our part, have been endeavoring to preserve it, to enjoy it for ourselves, and to transmit it to our children and our children's children. Now, in order to do this, the constitutional administration of this government must be maintained. I beg of you not to allow your minds to be carried off by picayune arguments to your pocketbooks or impassioned appeals to your prejudices. True democratic government makes no appeal to the station of a person's life, their condition, or the color of their skin. It's vain. It's foolish to arraign this man or that man for the part he has or has not taken in this struggle. In no administration will there be perfect equanimity of action or uniform satisfaction rendered by all. But this government must be preserved in spite of the actions of any man or any set of men. Nowhere in the world is presented to any people a government such as this one, affording them so much liberty and equality. They say that we have the best government the world ever knew. To the humblest, to the poorest among us, are held out the highest privileges and positions. I was raised to farm work. In my 8th year, my family removed to Indiana, an unbroken forest. I was rather large of my age, and an axe was put into my hands almost at once. And from that till within my 23rd year, I was almost constantly handling that most useful instrument. Oh, there were some schools, so-called. I think the aggregate of all my schooling didn't amount to a single year. No qualification was ever required of a teacher other than to read, write, and cipher. You know, if a stranger happened into our neighborhood who was supposed to understand Latin, people looked at him as some kind of a wizard. There was absolutely nothing to excite any ambition for education. So, nobody ever expected me to be president. I'm a living witness that in this country, if we manage to preserve it, any one of your children could look to come here just like my own poor father's child did. I'll tell you though, the presidency, even to the most experienced politicians, is no bed of roses. If I would even try to read, much less answer all of the attacks that come upon me, I think this shop would have to be closed for any other business. It's politics. Even before I came here, out in Illinois, my old lifelong friend, Stephen Douglas. When things got difficult, he took to calling me a two-faced man. I'll leave that to my audience. If I had another face, you think I'd wear this one? Oh, I think it's evident to all, and I say this without any mock modesty, that I am probably the humblest individual to have ever been elevated to the office of the United States presidency. I've been called unqualified, uncouth, unkempt, uneducated, all of which are probably true. Well, actually, I prefer self-educated or self-made, as we used to say, although I realize not everyone would look upon that favorably. I remember out in Illinois, I think it was after the Republican state convention in which I happened to mention this, a fella came up to me and he said, "Did I hear you saying that you were a self-made man?" I said, "Well, you did, sir. Well, there's him. He's pretty well self-made." His reply, "Well, I think you did a poor job of it. I wouldn't vote for you if you was St. Peter himself." I looked at him, I said, "Well, my friend, if I were St. Peter, you probably wouldn't be in my district anyway." Actually, being self-made is not entirely true. All that I am, or hope to be if I survive the next 4 years, I owe to my angel mother. Oh, I still can remember her prayers. They've always followed me. They've clung to me my entire life. Of course, now, she wasn't a perfect woman. In fact, I'm told there's no such thing as a perfect woman. Now, I only partly believe that, ladies, but I have it by good authority. There was a Methodist minister. Years ago, out in Illinois, I was attending divine service in an old hard-shell Methodist church. And the preacher was carrying on and on about how there's no record in Scripture or anywhere in all the history of any perfect woman. There was only the Savior, and he was a man. But there was a little lady out there that morning. I think she objected to this line of theology. She jumped up and started a shouting, "Parson, I beg to differ with ye. I think there was at least one perfect woman in this tortured world, because lands I've heard of her nearly every day for the past 3 years." I don't think he was accustomed to this sort of interruption, especially from the gentler sex, so-called. He finally pieced himself back together and he said, "Well, would you mind telling us all who that might have been?" She said, "Certainly. It was my husband's first wife." So I reckon there might be a few perfect women in this world. Actually, my mother was my father's first wife. He married another woman about a year after my mother's decease. Actually, she was just as good and kind of mother to me as my own. Just goes to show you, gentlemen, any woman will do well as long as she's well done by. And so I think of this whole country. We'll do well as long as we're well done by. 4 years ago, just 4 years ago, 1/8 of our entire population was slaves. Not distributed generally throughout the Union, but located primarily in the southern part of it. This institution constituted a powerful financial interest, and all knew that somehow this interest was the cause of this war. To strengthen, perpetuate, and extend this interest was the cause for which these rebels would dissolve the Union, while we were attempting at that time to simply prevent its farther extension, knowing that ultimately that would mean its ultimate demise. Nobody then expected for this war, the magnitude or the duration which it obtained. Nobody supposed that the very cause of the conflict would cease with, even before the conflict itself ceased. Each looked for an easier triumph, and the result less fundamental and astounding. Both read the same Bible, prayed to the same God. Each invoked his aid against the other. You know, it may seem strange for us that any man would dare to ask a just God's assistance in wringing their bread from the sweat of other men's faces. But let us judge not, lest we also be judged. The prayers of both could not be answered. That of neither has been answered fully. Woe unto the world because of offenses. For it must needs be that offenses come, but woe unto that man by whom the offense cometh. My friends, if we shall suppose that American slavery is one of those offenses which, in the providence of God, must needs have come, and which, having continued to his appointed time, he now wills to remove, and that he gives to both North and South this terrible war, as the woe due unto those by whom the offense came. Shall we discern therein any departure from those divine attributes which believers in a living God have always ascribed to him? Fondly do we hope. Fervently do we pray that this mighty scourge of war shall speedily pass away, and yet if God wills that it continue until all of the wealth piled by the bondman's 250 years of unrequited toil shall be sunk, and until every drop of blood drawn by the lash shall be repaid by another drawn by the sword. Nevertheless, it will be said, as was said some 3,000 years ago, the judgments of the Lord are true and righteous altogether. Well, I'm glad that we can meet together this day, not with sorrow, but with gladness of heart. Surely the evacuation of the rebels from Richmond and Petersburg, Virginia, have given us hope. My friends, we are going to see a righteous and a speedy peace whose joyous expression will not much longer be restrained. In the midst of all of the rejoicing, he from whom all blessings flow must not be forgotten. In fact, a call for national thanksgiving has been prepared and will be duly promulgated. Nor must those whose heart of part has given us cause for rejoicing be forgotten. You know, I've just returned from Richmond. I myself happened to be very near the front. I had the great pleasure of transmitting much of the recent good news to the people. But no part of the honor for plan or execution belongs to me. It goes to General Grant, to his brave men and skillful officers. It's to them it all belongs. So, with all the recent successes, the re-inauguration of the National Authority Reconstruction, which frankly has had a large share of my thought from the very beginning, is pressed much more closely upon us. It is indeed fraught with difficulty, and I intend to listen to the advice of my councils, my cabinet men, and use due precaution. But I thank God for the evidence I received by your very visitation today and many other people, that I shall be supported by citizens such as yourselves in the efforts that I intend to make to restore this union, so as to make it a union of hearts and hands as well as of states. Now, in saying this, I do not wish to be understood as having any peculiar prejudice against Southern people. I view them as much akin to ourselves. My friends, if slavery had already existed among us, we would not have just instantly gotten rid of it either. And I think if it had not already existed among them, they wouldn't have introduced it. I've always believed this of the people, South as well as North. Now, doubtless there were people on both sides who would have never owned a slave under any circumstances. And I suspect that there are people on both sides, even now, who would gladly see it reintroduced. But so far as I'm concerned, I do not intend to retract nor modify the Proclamation of Emancipation. Nor shall I return to slavery any of the persons freed by the terms of that document or by any of the subsequent acts of Congress. If the people should, by whatever mode or means, make it an executive duty to re-enslave those people, I'm afraid some other, not myself, will have to be their instrument to perform that. And in saying this, I'm not attempting to compliment my own wisdom or sagacity. Frankly, I don't claim to have controlled events. I'll confess plainly, events have controlled me. Now, nearing the end of this struggle, this nation's condition is not what either party or any man alone devised or expected. God alone can claim it. But my friends, I still believe that that principle in our Chart of Liberty, the Declaration of Independence, which proclaims that all men are created equal, remains the great fundamental principle upon which all of our future liberties rest. Cannot this government be reunited on that same principle? My friends, if it can, I will consider myself one of the happiest men alive if I can so help to reunite it. If it cannot, it will be awful. If this government cannot be reunited without giving up that principle, well, I was about to say I would rather be assassinated on this very spot than to surrender that. Well, I'm loath to close. Time marches on. I thank you for the audience. We are not enemies, but friends. We must not be enemies. Though passion may have strained, it must not break our bonds of affection. Surely the mystic cords of memory, stretching over every battlefield and every patriot grave, to every living heart and hearthstone all over this broad land, will yet swell the course of union. When touched as surely they will be by the better angels of our natures. And so, with malice toward none, with charity for all, with firmness in the right, as God gives us to see the right, let us strive on to finish this work we are in, to bind up our nation's wounds, to care for him who shall have borne the battle, for his widow and his orphan, to do all which may achieve and cherish a just, a lasting peace among ourselves and with all nations.
I have always felt that I never had any more ability than the average American man, except perhaps in one area, that of leadership. I've always wanted to be a leader, never a follower. And so, when it came to me to fill the office of President of the United States back in September of 1901, I was ready to act as I saw that the President should act. I felt that the President should be at the forefront of making sure that every American was given a square deal, that the opportunity for every American to advance or to fail was open to that individual. I felt that the nation needed somebody that they could look up to see that a problem was solved, or at least give it the best chance of being solved as possible. I feel that our Congress failed miserably in that particular duty, although there are some good congressmen. For the most part, they're rather just in it as if it were a club of some sort to make money from. I felt that our Supreme Court had for too long forgotten the fact that the Constitution was made for the people of the United States and not the people for the Constitution. These were areas that I decided that I would be the president of. That when things were needed to be done, then by golly, whether it be in a foreign land or on the home front, that I would see that, at least try to see, that my best efforts were to go on behalf of the United States of America. I, for too long, felt that we were lacking militarily in regards to the European military. So I was determined to do something about that. Enlarge the Army somewhat, enlarge the Navy a great deal, let the rest of the world know that we had come upon the scene, that we were no longer a ragamuffin nation begging handouts at the table of civilized European countries. No more of that. By golly, they know that Americans were growing up, and we had power and strength and audacity, and we knew how to use it if necessary. And as a matter of fact, the Navy did grow up to become, if not the leading nation in the world as far as naval matters were concerned, we were second only to Great Britain by the time I left office. I was determined to see that child labor laws were put into force that benefited families to the extent that they didn't have to send their children into the woolen mills in Carolina or into the coal mines of Pennsylvania for just pennies a day. No more of that. I was determined that as president, I would see our nation grow and see it grow in a way that benefited the rest of the world. The Panama Canal was built by Americans. Only Americans could really have achieved it in the short time that we have done so. And only America could guarantee the free and equal transit by nations' ships of all sorts. It was our duty to the rest of the world to see that this great achievement was undertaken and completed. I did not worry much about how Congress, I hoped that Congress would follow my lead. But the fact was, when the time came for the acquisition of the rights to the canal came along, that we were ready to take advantage of it. There were those, of course, who disagreed with the nation. Well, that's quite all right, but they were wrong in their position. So I decided to let Congress debate it, and I took the canal, to put it bluntly. There were people who decided that we didn't have to be in the Philippines. Obviously, the Philippines thought that their independence from Spain meant independence from anyone. Well, we all know that it would have been a tragedy on our part if we had just pulled out and let the Philippines drift into a very bloody and mean civil war. It was our duty to stay and bring that nation to a sense where it could handle its own independence, and we are aiming for that. But it's not just in foreign affairs that America became involved. We have issues at home that the President of the United States should be involved in, should be a leader of. When the great coal strike occurred in Pennsylvania, 50,000 miners off the job, even more railroad workers off the job. Of course, in those days, mine owners felt that they were the next thing to God as far as their holdings of coal mines, railroads, and such. And the strike was not going to be settled. As president, I wasn't sure what I could do, but I knew this, that the strike had to be settled before cold weather came in. I was not going to have hospitals, schools, other establishments remain cold during the winter to come. People were not going to suffer because the coal mine owners refused to sit down with the coal mine unions or representatives of the unions and talk about the need to get together, which they refused to do. At one point, I got so mad at a meeting that I did not care for the way that the coal mine owners were talking to myself and the union representatives. I got so mad at their stubbornness that I wanted to get up and throw the individuals out the window of a two-story house when we were on the second floor. Later on, again, not sure of my position as president, I just let it be known that if the coal mine owners did not sit down with the representatives of the miners, that I would send in the United States Army to operate the coal mines. Now, this created quite a furor. I didn't know if I had the power to do it. But the other antagonists didn't know that I didn't have the power to do it, or that, whether I had the power or not, that I would not do it. Well, they somehow decided to get together, settle things, which they did, brought it to the strike to an end, got the miners back, and got the coal into the homes and the industries of America. It was using the power of the president to influence, not necessarily demand, but to influence others to do what needed to be done. I believe that I used every ounce of power in the president's office that I can for the benefit of the people of the United States of America. There are other issues which quite honestly, I could have done better. Other issues I certainly could have done worse. But the fact was that I was going to do something. I was not going to treat my time in office as sort of a paid-for vacation for a politician. The office of the presidency is too important to the life of this nation to not hold it with a sense of ethics and responsibility. I believe that I did that, and I believe that my administration was actually a blessing for the country. Some people would call that hubris, and some people would call that bragging. But whatever you call it, that's the way Roosevelt operated. A retired president doesn't get to be in the limelight much once he is out of the public eye. So I'm grateful when someone or some one group seeks my thoughts and opinions on any topic. I have been asked to speak briefly on the conservation movement and where I fit into it. I appreciate the thought that I have made an important contribution in the field of conservation and preservation, as well as in the area of national parks, national forests, national monuments, wildlife refuges, and the like. Well, I have made important contributions, but not alone. Hundreds and hundreds of thousands of Americans helped move us forward in progressive thinking about our natural world. The problem had been that there had been no national thought or consciousness for conservation in any general aspect and in any respect for the wonderful country that God expects us to be good stewards of. And there was no real leadership in this area when I was younger. To illustrate where we were, I have to state that many people consider me the father of the national park system. But this is wrong. In January of 1872, a bill for the creation of the world's first national park, Yellowstone, was introduced into the Senate by Senator Samuel Pomeroy of Kansas. It passed almost unanimously in the Senate. In February of that year, it passed in the House by 2/3 vote. This is one of those rare times where both houses of Congress have actually done something that really benefits the people of the United States, I think. On March 1st, 1872, President Grant signed the bill that created our first national park. I was still only 13 years old then. By the time I became president, there were 4 more national parks: Yosemite, Sequoia, Mount Rainier, and U.S. Grant. I just kind of helped promote the parks that we had. And before I left office, I got 5 more parks created. The national park system was helped immensely by having leaders like Stephen Mather and Horace Albright in top positions when the Park Service was created back in 1914. But by then, I had spent a lifetime interested in preserving and maintaining the natural environment. It started when I was a young lad in New York City, enthralled by the wildlife around me. Yes, even in that metropolis. My love of birds and the environment that they lived in just naturally led to interest in other animals, big animals, and other locations. And the beauty of the natural world, whether it be the well-tended forests and farms of the Midwest, or the badlands of the Dakotas, well, that should swell the pride Americans have, fill the soul of every American who loves his country. As I was growing to manhood and growing my family, I could easily see that God had created a bounty of natural wealth for us, for we Americans. I could also see that many of my fellow citizens were missing and despoiling this land. I could see that the land in places was being ravaged. I could see the natural resources being used without thought to the future. Indeed, I was becoming alarmed that if we didn't stop our unwise use, that our future generations would suffer grievously for our greed. This is a magnificent country, the most blessed on earth. We are not building this country for just one generation. We are building it for our children and our children's children and all the Americans to come. As a young man, I could see then that there were places in this country where our citizens were turning this natural world into a garbage heap. Rivers were polluted, forests were cut down, land worn out by overuse, and wildlife disappearing because of lost habitat. I was determined to do something to correct this slide before it was fatal to our nation. I guess I became one of the standard bearers that other like-minded people could rally around. I was a charter member and first president of the Boone and Crockett Club. In January of 1888, George Bird Grinnell, editor of the Forest and Stream magazine, and I brought together in New York a group of sportsmen to form probably what would be the first group that had any clout with congressmen over issues of conservation. We established a committee that was instrumental in creating the National Zoo in Washington, D.C. And we were, in 1894, the driving force for getting the Park Protection Act passed. This act saved Yellowstone from an ecological disaster. The club also helped establish zoological gardens in New York State. We protected sequoia groves in California. And we helped create an Alaska Island reserve for seals and salmon and birds, seabirds. These were among the early steps that led to greater awareness by our citizens and the growing realization it was up to us to do something positive in this area of national life. And it fell to me to be instrumental in leading the way in conservation in this country. I like Americans. I think that if they aren't hardcore Democrats or party bosses, that they like me. I love America, and I liked being with Americans who felt the same way. I did not mind holding the standard aloft for others to rally around, and if needed, I would do it again. I wholeheartedly believe in the wise use of our natural resources. I believe in using timberlands to provide the wood for our homes and for our industry. I believe in dams put in the proper spots to provide hydroelectric power. I believe in big farms and big ranches to provide the food for our growing population. But I believe in the wise use of our resources. Where one tree has been cut for its wood, let two be planted in its place. Where farms harvest bountiful crops, let the land lie fallow to replenish itself. Where cattle roam, be careful not to overgraze. Where rivers are dammed, let the water levels be kept even and the waters themselves be kept clean. It is not for us to use wastefully in recreation or in an effort to make a penny's profit or just thoughtlessly misuse that we have such blessings from the Almighty. Let us by our stewardship deserve what we have been given as a nation. Our conservation efforts should be for the benefit of the people. Not everything we enjoy in the country should be looked at as having value only if it has a cash benefit. There is much in this land that deserves preservation and stewardship just for the value of its being. For instance, in May of 1903, I gave a speech at the Grand Canyon to the citizens of Arizona. Allow me to quote from part of that message. I want to ask you to do one thing in connection with it. In your own interest and the interest of all the country, keep this great wonder of nature as it now is. I hope you won't have a building of any kind to mar the grandeur and sublimity of the canyon. You cannot improve upon it. The ages have been at work on it, and man can only mar it. Keep it for your children and your children's children and all who come after you as one of the great sights for Americans to see. Conservation, preservation, and wise use should be the foundations of stewardship with our natural resources, whether on a national or a state level. My terms in office have provided plenty of interesting history, and I am proud of what we achieved. But if my legacy as president rests solely on what my leadership achieved in regard to national parks, national monuments, national forests, wildlife refuges, and placing them in the forefront of American thought, then I can rest proudly with that.